Hi guys, welcome to Brand X Reviews. Today I'm going to be talking about the Poltergeist franchise, the 4 movies, the 3 original movies and then the 2015 remake, which I only got to see for the first time recently. Now, I was always a big fan of the first 2 films in particular. These were films that, from quite a young age, I rewatched these many times, myself and my sister and my mother as well. We were all quite big fans of the first 2 films. I do recall the third film was not one that my mother liked particularly, and she always said, no, the third one is terrible, I've seen it, you don't want to waste your time with that. But I'll come back onto that one anyway. So, like I say, it's a film franchise that is quite widely regarded as a classic in terms of the horror genre, and it started out with a trilogy, as you can see here. The first film came out in 1982, and it was directed by a guy called Tobe Hooper, who was the film director of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original film. He's done some other good work as well that I've liked, but now when I say it was directed by him, it's quite well understood that, and this isn't really a theory, it's quite well understood that Steven Spielberg pretty much as good as directed this film in every way other than name, because I don't know whether it was the Directors Guild or whatever that wouldn't allow him to direct 2 films at any one time, and at the time he was directing E.T. and he'd written the script for it and also produced it, and from what I understand he was pretty much calling the shots when it came to directing the thing as well. And you do get the sense when you're watching that as well, it's kind of got a lot of the kind of hallmarks of a Spielberg film in a lot of ways, the kind of suburban America setting to it and that kind of real world feel, which really helps as well because it's kind of like the X-Files thing that Chris Carter always used to talk about when he did the X-Files, when he said, you know, it's only as scary as it is believable, and you kind of get the sense of that with this film. Now, one good thing about the original Poltergeist film, and the second one as well, is that it doesn't hold back on the humour as well. I mean, it's quite a dark concept, really, with all these movies. But there's some legitimately funny bits in it as well, so there's a lot to be enjoyed by this. And I think that's kind of what creates a lot of the magic with these films. It's good when you can do that, when you can find a balance of suspense, but also humour. You get that in film franchises like Lethal Weapon as well, for example. So you tend to find, you know, at times when things are really dark and just nasty, this kind of weird sense of humour kind of emerges, and you kind of get that in this. It's a nice balance as well. So obviously, without giving any major spoilers, but in the first film, it's about this little girl that goes missing, in effect, and what kind of the background is to that, and obviously it's to do with ghosts, poltergeists. Now, it's not just kind of a dumb supernatural film. It does kind of go into a little bit of the concepts about spirits, ghosts, particularly as they are presented in this film. Some of the theories about what they are, because I mean, I know I've talked about this a bit in the past on this channel in terms of reviewing films about ghosts. A lot of people have their own take on what ghosts are, and this film does present that and talks about them basically being lost souls that are kind of looking for some kind of direction after they've passed away. They don't realise that they're dead, they just kind of need to go off into the light kind of thing. So a lot of that is presented in this, and I think it really kind of resonates as well, especially if you're a fairly spiritual person. You might kind of resonate with it if you haven't already seen these. So the first film in particular is brilliant for that. The special effects in the first film are really amazing for their time as well. You can kind of see that some of the people that worked on this movie kind of went on to do things like Ghostbusters, because some of the special effects kind of similar to that, and still in a way kind of hold up today, still stand up by today's standards. Don't get me wrong, it's dated, but it still looks respectable. So that's the first film anyway. Now, that was in 1982. Now, the sequel came out, what was it, a few years later, 1986. And the little girl in this one is kind of getting stalked again. But at least in the second one, they don't just do the exact same thing they did in the first one, which is what you get a lot with today's horror movies when they do sequels. They just kind of retread the same thing. In this one, it's not really about anyone going missing. But obviously, it's a sequel and it's a follow-up, so you've got a lot of the same sort of things. Now, this film does tend to be a little bit more, well, a little bit less creative, I suppose, in some ways. The special effects are quite good. and they introduce a few new characters, but they bring back pretty much all of the same characters in terms of the family that were in the first film. The older sister isn't in this because the actress that played her was actually murdered shortly after, or sometime around the time the first film came out. Another tragedy as well, the little girl in this, Heather O'Rourke, she passed away around about the time the third film came out. So this is a film franchise which some people say is a bit cursed. Yeah, so that's that. But the second film is definitely worth checking out. It's not as good as the first film, don't get me wrong, but it's still a worthy sequel. The third one, on the other hand, is not the case. The third one is pretty terrible. Now, this film came out the same year as Die Hard, although I believe it was supposed to come out in 1987. But some people basically said it's Die Hard, but with ghosts, because it's basically set, instead of it being in sort of suburban America, it's in a kind of a high-rise kind of building with lots of glass. And some of the effects are okay, but it's not a great film, and it undoes a lot of the stuff that the first two films did. I would say this film isn't that terrible, it's just average, but I actually say it's below average. It's a less than average film because it undoes the things that they did in the first two films. Part of the strength about the first two films was the main characters were able to fend off all these ghosts and stay protected from it because they had each other. They loved each other. They stuck together, and that was what kept their strength against all this stuff. So then in the third film, they basically say, well, the parents have just given the child up. They just don't want her anymore. So it's like, what the hell? That's the complete opposite of what was established in the previous two films. So really bad. Now in this film, he's got Tom Skerritt and what's she called? Nancy Allen. Tom Skerritt was Dallas in the original Alien film. Nancy Allen played Officer Lewis in RoboCop. So you might recognise them. But the little girl again is in this, Heather O'Rourke, and like I say, she died sometime around about this film was made. So pretty sad, to be honest. She was really kind of cute looking little girl. Obviously that was why they kind of chose her, because you kind of feel sad when she goes missing, kind of thing. But yeah, so that was the franchise. They didn't do any more sequels after that, and a remake got pretty much held up until 2015 when they did Poltergeist that year with Sam Rockwell, who's a really good actor, and he's not too bad in this as well, it has to be said. Now this film, I would say, is average, nothing more, nothing less. It's not a bad film. It's not a great film either. It just kind of retreads the same ground. It has some kind of funny bits in it, and some pretty creepy bits in it, and some quite effective things when, if you've seen the original film, basically some people go into this like kind of zone that is between our world and the spirit world. But in the original film, you don't really get to see much of it. They just kind of go in it and then come out of it. In this one, they go into it and you get to see what's inside there, and it's quite effective, it has to be said. For a film that I'm saying is average, that bit was actually quite good. And I believe this film came out in 3D in cinemas, and I don't usually say this, but I imagine that would have looked quite nice in 3D as well. So, but other than that, it's a fairly forgettable film. It doesn't really bring anything new. Not much anyway, other than the bit that I just mentioned. So that's the 4 films anyway. If you haven't seen these, I'd say at the very least check out the first 2. If for the sake of being a completist like me, you want to watch all of them, give the third one a watch, but just kind of keep it at a distance from the first 2. It's kind of like the Indiana Jones films, to be honest. You've got the original trilogy, and then the 4th one, just kind of like acknowledge it, but it's not part of the series as far as I'm concerned. In fact, speaking of Indiana Jones, somebody once said the first Poltergeist film, bearing in mind the Spielberg connection, the entire first film is like the last part of Raiders of the Lost Ark, when the Ark opens and all that spiritual stuff happens. It's really creepy. The entire film Poltergeist is like that. I have to say I agree with that. So that would be my endorsement for watching these films, especially the first film. The second film is worth a watch. The other 2, maybe don't bother with them, but that's up to you. Don't be disappointed. So I'll leave it there anyway. That's a Poltergeist film franchise. I'll be doing further reviews on this channel, so if you want to subscribe, you can find us obviously on YouTube, but we're also on Facebook and Instagram. For now, I'll just leave it there and say thank you very much for watching.
Will the core roar? Or will he roar? Tell us, core. But it ain't no easy grab, they got teeth.